Greetings. In the last video, we were discussing the book of 2 Kings, chapter 23, and we reached verse number 5 that says how the Israeli Jews used to worship the sun and the moon and the constellations. Also Baal, don't forget that. Baal was always their favorite, and the goddess of sex, Ashtoreth. And now we read, Asherah as well, another god, idol. And we said how the rotten, stupid Zionists, they attack Islam and they lie and say that Allah is the moon god. And that's why the Muslims, sacred so much the half a moon. We discussed this. And we said it is the Jews who sacred not half a moon, but the moon, the full moon, this planet, and the sun, the star. We discussed all this in the last video. You can go back and listen to it again. They are the worshippers of the moon, God, not the Muslims. The Muslims have orders not to do it. All right, let's continue. Let's go to verse 11, chapter 23, verse 11. He removed from the entrance to the temple of the Lord the horses that the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun. So they used to worship the sun. They had horses, dedicated to the sun god, and chariots as well. They were in the court near the room of an official named Nathan Melech, Josiah. Then burned the chariots dedicated to the sun. Chariots dedicated to the sun. How stupid it is. Does the sun come sometimes down to earth and need a chariot and a horse to wander around like human beings? The sun is many, many times larger, greater in size than our planet. Our planet is so small compared to the sun. Very well. So let's go back, to this idol worship and planets and constellations and the sun and the moon. The Jews used to worship the moon god, not the Muslims. Let's go to the book of Ezra, chapter 5, verse 12. But because of our ancestors angered the God of heaven, he gave them into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean, king of Babylon, who destroyed this temple and destroyed the people of Babylon and deported the people to Babylon. All right, so what's the story here? There are so much to talk about here. Let's take it easy and discuss it. So let's read it again. This is Ezra speaking, chapter 5, verse 12. But because our ancestors angered the God of heaven, he gave them into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar of the Chaldean, king of Babylon, who destroyed this temple and deported the people to Babylon. All right, well, to be honest, this doesn't belong, to the discussion at this point. So let's postpone discussing this till later. Because this is Isaiah, Israel is after the Babylonian slavery, when the people came back to Palestine. But we are not there yet. This is the punishment, the consequences of their actions. They kept worshiping idols, they kept offending the Lord. So he finally, went through with his threats. He said they will perish fast from the land they are about to enter, to possess. He said, if you worship idols, curses on top of curses will come over your head. All right, so let us give a brief discussion or brief description to what we covered so far. First of all, the promise in the Jewish Christian book that the rotten Zionists lie and say this is about Isaac. It was not about Isaac, it was about the firstborn son to Abraham, Ishmael. He always had the land. And the Lord said forever, Isaac never had the land for a very long time. Always possessed the land for a very short period of time. He always came for a visit. Isaac, I mean the Israelis, of course, the Israeli Jews. We discussed this by saying they went to Egypt and stayed for almost 1,000 years away from the land in Egypt. Not to mention that Jacob stayed 10 years with serving his uncle Laban in Babylon, away from the land, and all his children were in Babylon. And then he came for a very short period, then he followed Joseph to Egypt. For 1,000 years the Israelis were in Egypt. 500 years to get to be a huge number, 400 to 430 years in slavery, 40 years in the desert, almost 1,000 years away from the land that's supposed to be theirs forever, according to the lies of the Zionists. Then they came for a short period of time and lived in Palestine. And they were slaves in Palestine. They never owned the land. For many years, they always went to war with the Palestinians, and they were subdued by the Palestinians, and they became slaves to the Palestinians for many, many years during their stays. And then there come the fulfillment of the threat from the Lord to uproot them from the land, and he did. So, in essence, we say, yes, we cannot deny that the Lord promised the Israeli Jews endless blessings if they obey and carefully follow his commands. But it is stupid on the part of the Zionists to ignore the greater promise. The blessings in 15 verses, Deuteronomy 28 from 1 to 15. But the curses from 16 to 65, curses and threats that the Lord will pour over their heads, the Israeli Jews, if they offend the Lord and worship idols. And we just finished discussing that during their stay in Palestine, they did not worship the Lord. They worshipped idols, always. And even the planets and the stars. And they worshipped the moon god. Those stupid, Zionists among the Israeli Jews who attack Allah today, and they say Allah is the moon god, and Muslims worshipping the moon. Those miserable, their rotten ancestors, worship the moon god, not the Muslims. The Muslims have clear orders in the Quran not to worship the moon or the sun or anything else apart from Allah, the Lord Almighty himself. So we finished with the promise, with the threats. We finished discussing the reaction of the Israeli Jews against the threat not to worship idols, not to offend the Lord. And they did exactly what he said, don't do it. Don't do it. And they did it. Now we're waiting to see how the Lord reacted. Thank you for watching. Take care.